All right, well, welcome everyone to this week's Rocket Pool community call. Just a little bit of housekeeping here is to be able to get the call started. First, thank you all for joining here in the Chit Chat channel. I see that everyone has already muted their connection. Thank you very much for doing so, as we'll be recording today's call, but I'll certainly pause at a number of points in today's community call that allow you to come up on stage if you like, or you can chat in our trading channel. I'll try to pull that up and monitor that as best I can. We're also going to start this year here with a new format. One of the feedback that we've received in the renewal of our grant to host the community calls was that we received some feedback that we'd like to separate the special guest segments, like today's is, from that of the more in-depth Rocket Pool protocol community updates. So today's call is going to be the start of that new format. So we'll be able to devote the entire time this morning to our special guest that we'll announce here in just a second. And you might have picked up that we're trying to introduce more European-friendly times this year. So welcome very much to all of those that are at a more reasonable time, dialing either from Europe or from places in kind of the time zones closer to the EU time zones. But with that, let me go ahead and introduce our special guest. Our special guest is, and I'm going to try to pronounce this right, it's Liquity, no D in there, Liquity, which is a decentralized protocol, borrowing protocol on the Ethereum blockchain. And joining us today is Sam. Welcome.
Hey everyone. Nice to meet you all. Thank you so much for joining. Today I'd like to kind of walk you through Liquity V2, which I believe is one of the best places to borrow against rETH and other forms of ETH. And yeah, happy to be here and happy to talk more about the protocol itself and also answer any questions that you might have before, if you were to ever decide to use the protocol.
Yeah, perfect. And for those that are maybe unfamiliar, can you start with just a brief introduction what liquidity is?
Yeah, so Liquity is a decentralized borrowing protocol. We're considered, I would say, one of the most Ethereum aligned protocol in the space. With Liquity V1, we launched something called LUSD, where you could essentially deposit ETH as collateral and mint LUSD at a 0.5% one-time fee rate. Oops. Um, that worked quite well in terms of, and it's still working till today in terms of LUSD still having around a 65 million market cap. There's still around 400 million TVL in Liquidity V1. But the problem with having a one-time fee of 0.5% was that in times of high interest rate environments, the protocol did not really scale because essentially we had something within Liquidity V1 called redemptions, which would affect people who were essentially the least collateralized in the protocol. So this essentially meant that there was kind of uh, an issue where borrowers could not really borrow with high capital efficiency. So we thought to ourselves, and there's also other things. When we launched Liquidity V1 3 years ago, LSTs like Rocket Pool ETH and Lido ETH and even now LRTs were not really a thing. So, our community were kind of asking for additional collateral types and also something a little bit more scalable. So we spent the last year and a half kind of iterating on, what are some design choices we could do to make Liquidity V2 come to fruition and make it a bit more all-weather in terms of being able to handle both low interest rate environments and high interest rate environments, and also support multi-collateral assets. So Liquidity V2 takes upon kind of the same immutable nature of Liquidity V1, but instead now adds ETH, Rocket Pool ETH, and Lido ETH as collateral types. And on top of that, we have something quite novel in the sense that now you can set your own interest rate when you borrow. Uh, which means that, compared to other platforms like MakerDAO or Aave, which where rates are either determined by governance or determined by kind of like the utilization factors between supply and demand, in Liquidity V2, you can essentially set your own fixed rate, so to speak. So what we aim to bring with this protocol is like I would say like a market-driven, market wide interest rate for borrowing against ETH, Lido ETH, and Rocket Pool ETH, while also keeping the same decentralized ethos that I mentioned. Since when we deployed the code a week ago, we deployed it immutably. So there's no additional collateral types that can be added. There's nothing else that can be changed. Whatever terms and conditions you see right now in the code are pretty much what it's going to be for the rest of time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a perfect introduction here, and I guess I didn't realize. I mean, I knew that there was a difference between V1 and V2, but I didn't realize that V2 is really that fresh out of production, I guess, or to mainnet. Is it really that close to your launch?
Yeah. So it's only been a week. We deployed exactly a week ago, maybe a few hours earlier, but yeah, so far, we've actually seen pretty decent traction. We have around 51 million TVL right now, around 18 million of Bold, our new stablecoin that's been minted. Um, and I'll walk you guys through the screen share in a bit where I actually open a trove with rETH. But one of the cool things about Liquidity V2 is that we're kind of diverting 100% of interest revenue that borrowers pay to go towards growing the stablecoin. So, there should be continuous like holding demand for the stablecoin Bold. And this is a bit different to how it was with LUSD. LUSD had a great kind of like censorship resistant quality in the sense that, it's only backed by Ether. The protocol is immutable. But one thing that we realized is that, there is no real continuous holding demand for LUSD because there was no like continuous yield source. So that's something that we hope to change with Bold. And um, yeah, it's only 1 week in. We will have like 15 plus forks coming across various different EVM chains as well, who will airdrop to users of the protocol. So it sets up for a very exciting next year, really.
Yeah, perfect. And I don't know, let me know if you want us to walk us through some of the interface and the process and how it works. But I guess one question I have is maybe talk a little bit more because I think it is unique about the borrower set interest rates. Now that you've launched and had about a week of experience here, how is that working? I mean, are people overbidding, underbidding? I guess maybe the market will determine what the rate of borrow is by which ones are funded. Is that sort of the essence of it?
So, what's actually very interesting is that our rates are kind of quite a bit lower than the competition. So I'll just share my screen. Give me a sec here. Um, just connected. Uh, cool. Let me just make it 720p should be fine, I suppose. Or do you have
Yeah,
any
yeah,
recommend?
yeah. I
Yeah.
think so. We haven't had too many people do a share screen simulcast here. And I'll probably, if you can, as you go through it, maybe just be a little descriptive in your audio, as many people will listen to this in a podcast format afterwards.
Cool. No worries. Yeah, sure. I can do that. Uh, cool. Let me know if you see my screen here.
Yep, it looks like we're looking at a Dune Analytics dashboard here.
Yeah, perfect. Cool. So this is the Liquidity V2 Dune Analytics dashboard that kind of details where we are in terms of the total TVL, what the protocol has generated, the collateral ratio, the bold supply, and everything. But if you go a bit further down here, we essentially, have these three collateral assets that we have in rETH, ETH, and Lido ETH. And you can clearly see on the chart that when we first launched last week on the 23rd, that like people were kind of confused as to what rate to set, right? Because the protocol just launched. Um, setting your own interest rate is a novel concept. So what we tended to see was that they kind of pretty much followed what the rates on the likes of Aave and others are. So I believe Aave and Maker, the rates were around 11%, maybe 1% higher or lower. So they ended up starting at that rate. But as the week has gone on, you've seen that like people have kind of adjusted the rates as they go, and the rates have kind of slowly dwindled further down and down and down and down. And right now, like the average interest rate to borrow on the various troves is kind of hovering under 7%. Um, but this is the cool thing as well, right? The cool thing about Liquidity V2 is that anyone can set their own interest rate, and then after each week, there is kind of like when you set your interest rate, there is a 7-day upfront fee that you have to pay, and then after that 7-day ends, you can adjust your interest rate again. So as I told you, we launched last week this time, right? So what I expect to see today is that people will probably adjust this interest rate even lower because they don't have to pay that upfront fee. So this rate will probably even go a bit lower. Now, if you compare this to kind of some of the other protocols out there, now this is quite a useful tool built by Block Analytica called Spear. You can clearly see, okay, now if you were to borrow ETH, Lido Staked ETH, and Rocket Pool ETH, and if you want to kind of see like the pretty much the average rate across various protocols, you can see, the average borrow rate, the 7-day borrow rate across all these protocols you can see here are pretty much 10% or higher for the most part. There's some that's a bit lower, but that's a pretty significant gap between the rate that Liquidity has compared to the rate that these other protocols have. And this is kind of like the beauty of, I would say, our market-driven nature. And you can also see here on, the interest rate a lot across collaterals, various.
Good morning.
Are you going to get a hold of your doctor today?
For what?
To talk to him.
Sneaky, thank you, Sneaky. Please go ahead, Sam.
No worries. So if you on the Dune dashboard as well, they're on top of the interest rates graph that we have. On the left, there's also a graph with various bubbles. And in that bubble graph, you'll see also, like at the start, everyone was setting at an interest rate of 10+%. And then now, as time has gone on, the interest rate has come down and down and down. And now, the average rate is settling at around, as I mentioned earlier, under 7% or so. So very interesting. Go ahead.
Let me, if I can, just to see if I'm grasping the concept of this. Let's say that I'm a holder of rETH. Maybe I hold 10 rETH, and I'd like to take a loan out to pay for something, perhaps one of my children's weddings. And so what would I do? I would go to the website and I'd look at this Dune Analytics. I would kind of see what the market rates are. They're about 4.5% right now, and I would decide where to place my bid to obtain a loan at that rate. Is that what these bubbles represent? These are people that are placing their ETH and asking for a loan at rates close to that market rate now?
No, so the difference here is that you mint the stablecoin yourself. So maybe a better representation would be me walking through the UX itself. So what you would do is you would get a feeling from this Dune dashboard what the average rate is. So you can see that the average rate in the last 24 hours for our ETH is 6.77%. Now you can go to one of the Liquity front ends. So that's another thing. We completely run on decentralized front ends. And right now we have 3 decentralized front ends. Liquity.app is one of them. It's a community run front end. There's DeFi Saver, there's a few others, but for today's example, I'll use Liquity.app. So you go on Liquity.app, and what you do essentially to mint Bold is you go to the borrow tab here of our ETH that you see. For the podcast listeners, there's 3 options. There's ETH, Lido ETH, and Rocket Pool ETH. You go into our ETH. In my case, in this particular wallet, I have 2.23 rETH. Let's just say I want to borrow against 2 rETH. First things first is that you can see that the max LTV that you can take is 83.3%, and you can mint Bold up to 83.3% of that collateral, right? So we have three kind of like default options that you can choose here, but you could also kind of type in, whatever amount you want. So I want to be a bit bold compared to most, and let's say I want to borrow at 5.5K against that to collateral ether, which means that my LTV is 75.49%. The liquidation price that I have is 3.3 grand. Now here's the cool thing that we offer compared to others. You can pretty much use this slider and set whatever interest rate you want. Now it can be higher, it can be lower. Now the thing that you have to keep in mind is that we have something within Liquity V2 called redemptions, which is our way of maintaining the peg of bold when it drops under 1. And essentially what happens on the back end is that anyone can, when they see that the peg of bold is a little bit under 1, can come in. So let's say it's 0.995. And what they can do is they can kind of call a contract and swap that bold for the underlying rETH that's in the system. Now you might be wondering, okay, who does this affect first? And this is the kind of like the key difference between Liquity V1 and Liquity V2. In Liquity V1, this affected people who were the least collateralized in the system. In Liquity V2, this essentially affects the people who are paying the least amount of interest in the system. So say I set it at like 10%, for example. If I set it at 10% on the rETH branch, you can see that there's like 1.4 million bold ahead of me that's in the queue to get redeemed. But let's say if I feel like I don't want to pay 10%, I want to pay a little bit less, and I want to take a little bit higher risk of getting redeemed, then I could set it at 8.5%, and there's a little bit there's only 278,000 bold ahead of me to get redeemed. So that's kind of like the mechanism of this setting your own interest rate. Now for rETH, in this particular instance, rETH is one of the markets that's, I would say, a little bit less utilized than the others. But a good example would be, for example, for ETH, right? For ETH, you could see, you can see right here. If I were to set my rate at even like at 5%, there is still $3.2 million worth of bold ahead of me. So $3.2 million of bold is setting a lower interest rate than the 5% that I've set. So there's actually people who have set it at like 4% or even lower at like 3% or so, right? So the chicken and egg here is that how safe do you want to be with your interest rate? Do you want to, like, if let's say you're going on vacation for 3 or 4 months and you don't want to think about it, then you can set it at maybe a little bit higher rate. But if you want to be a little bit more active and you want to kind of pay the least amount as possible, then you would probably set it at a little bit of a lower rate and kind of, take on that redemption risk if need be, right? And one of the cool things as well is that along with being able to set your interest rate by yourself, there are also kind of like various interest rate delegates that are kind of coming online over the next couple of weeks. And Liquity.app, for example, already has one called Summerstone, who can manage this interest rate for you as well. And they have pretty much two strategies within themselves. So they have the conservative strategy, which charges 12.6% a year, and they take a cut of like 0.3%. Or you have the balanced strategy, which is, I would say, a little bit more risky, and that charges 10.6% a year. And, that obviously comes with a little bit more risk. Now, the idea is that, as I mentioned, we've just launched it's just been a week. Over the next month, 2 months, we will see 5, 10, 15 different interest rate managers that a user can choose upon. And the other option also is that they could also kind of like, what you could also do is that you could open a loan with your cold wallet and make the interest rate address like a hot wallet that you have as well. So this is quite useful for people who are, I guess, going on vacation or want to kind of diversify risk in a way where the only thing that the hot wallet manages is like the interest rate feature. So
yeah, let me see if I could just ask some questions to see if I understand this. So I, as a borrower, would come in here in your example. Let's say I deposited $10,000 worth of ETH, or rETH would be the better example,
Yeah.
and I borrowed a loan at a 75% loan to value ratio, right? So I would choose. So that would be enough over collateralization that in a typical loan, like an Aave loan, I would not worry too much about my health factor and worry about a drop in the rETH price such that I become under collateralized or below the liquidation threshold. But instead, in this one here, it's based upon the interest rate. So let's say, being a cheap miser guy that I am, I decide I don't want to pay 12%. I'd like to come in at 5%, 6%, something like that. That puts me at the front of the liquidation queue, if you will, right? What happens if I do get liquidated? If let's say I'm not paying attention, Bold depegs a little bit, trades at a discount, and they liquidate me. Does it just sell the portion of ETH that I borrowed against that 75%?
Yes. So one thing I would like to correct you on is that the redemption rate and the liquidation rate are different. So the liquidation rate, the liquidation is the same as Aave. So let's say if let's say you're borrowing at a 75% or 66% loan to value, if the price of rETH hits 2,914, then you get liquidated. So that's something you need to monitor, just like in Aave, right? So what's different from Aave is that if you borrow on Aave, this interest rate is already dynamic. It's already set by Aave itself, depending on the amount of lenders and borrowers in the protocol. With us, the difference is that you can set your own rate. The only kind of like catch here is that by setting a lower rate, you potentially could get redeemed, and you don't actually suffer a net loss when you get redeemed. But what happens is that you lose your exposure to you lose your upside exposure to ETH. So that's kind of like it's essentially as if you were to sell your rETH at a premium for Bold, and your position would completely be converted to Bold, uh, and that's kind of like the only difference. So what might be kind of annoying for borrowers who are borrowing for a long time is that, let's say if they had 100 ETH position and they opened a loan of like 100 grand against that, and they're hoping for ETH to go up or whatever, and they kind of like leverage that and everything. And let's say they were to get redeemed, like their full trove gets redeemed. At that exact moment, let's say that day is today, the 30th of January, there is no net loss. But let's say tomorrow or the day after, the ETH price goes up. They have lost their entire exposure to ETH going up. But it could also theoretically happen that ETH goes down. So it's essentially they would have saved money. So that's the kind of like the redemption catch. You lose all your exposure in ETH, but everything essentially gets converted into Bold. So that's kind of like the trade-off that you have of setting your own interest rate, if that makes sense.
Yeah, perfect. That was my question. And just so I'm clear, when you say when you're redeemed, you lose your entire rETH deposit in our example. Do you lose that entire deposit? I mean, is it now just all issued in Bold? Or because if I took a loan out, let's say I only borrowed 75% of my rETH deposit, is it only that 75% that is redeemed and now I've lost or I hold that only in Bold? Or is it the entire 100% of my rETH deposit that now converts to Bold?
That's a good question. So it kind of depends upon the backing of Bold, corresponding to we have something within Liquity V2 called the stability pool, which is kind of like our liquidator of sorts. It's unlike other protocols which run auctions and whatnot. In our case, we have this liquidity pool, which is like the first line of defense. Now, what it depends on in terms of redemptions is the amount of Bold that is circulating out there that has less backing in the stability pool compared to the circulating. So in the case of yours, where let's say you're borrowing at 75% LTV, but the backing is quite sufficient, like the stability pool of rETH has quite a lot, then in that case, what could potentially happen is that you only get partially redeemed, So a portion of your loan gets closed. So your 2 ETH exposure, rETH exposure may come down to, like, let's say 1 rETH, and you still have your position open. So it kind of depends on the debt outside of the stability pool, if that makes sense.
Yeah, perfect. This is probably one of the best explanations I've seen of any DeFi borrowing protocol. So, yeah, excellent. Thank you. Keep going. I will mention that we will have a POAP here. I think we're close enough that let me give out the POAP code here. It should be active right now, actually. And let me scroll up and get the correct POAP code for everyone listening here. Hang on one second. The POAP code today is, well, we're gonna love this one here. I'm gonna type it the same way that Mav put it, but unfortunately he put a D in the name. So I know that it's Liquity is the name of the protocol, but the POAP code is spelled Liquidity with a D. Let me spell it: LIQUIDITY dash rETH, rETH. So the POAP code, unfortunately, is Liquidity with a D in it, I believe, LIQUIDITY.rETH. Post in trading if that doesn't work, and if not, I'll post it there. I don't know if it's just a typo when he typed it and it was autocorrected, or if when he was creating the POAP code he did like I did, and just instinctively you kind of want to force a D into the name of the protocol here. So, but that's the POAP code. But Sam, go ahead and continue, please.
Yeah, no worries. So I guess, what I mentioned, the borrow aspect of things, where you could just take your rETH and borrow against it. But let's say if you would also like to maybe leverage long on rETH as well, that is also an option that you have. So just on for the podcast listeners there, we have on the Liquity.app homepage, you have dashboard, borrow, multiply, earn, and stake. And the names that I just said, they do what they're intended to do. So if you want to multiply your exposure to rETH, it's kind of we have 2 sliders instead of 1 in this case. And you could multiply your exposure by kind of selecting what liquidation price you are most comfortable with, and setting your own interest rate there as well. What happens in the back end, how this works, is that we kind of source rETH liquidity on the likes of Balancer or wherever there is, and the swap kind of goes through there. So before I do that, I think what's best is maybe borrowing. I think that's probably the use case that most users would want to take right now with the market conditions that are as they are at the minute. So let me show you how you open a Trove. So let's say I want to borrow against 2 rETH. Used, as I mentioned earlier, you choose kind of like the amount of bold you want to mint. I'm a bit of a degen, so I'll mint at a higher LTV. I will set an interest rate of let me just see if this is the actual one. I think there's sometimes a lag with the front end. Yeah, so I wanna see where I am in the queue. I don't want to be kind of taking a big risk by setting it at 3%, because if I set it at 3%, then there's like 7.6 7.5K bold ahead of me. So I want to be a little bit safer, and I'm willing to take the risk of setting it at 7.4%, because setting it at 7.4% means there's 260K bold ahead of me to get redeemed. Now, before I do that, I just want to go ahead and check on Sphere to see for rETH what is kind of like the average borrow rate across DeFi. So I can see that if I were to borrow against rETH on other platforms, the average borrow rate seems to be around 12.5%, ranging from 10.5 to 12.5. So if I'm borrowing it at 7.4%, that seems like a pretty good deal. Next, I hit next. Then you can see here the amount of rETH that you're taking, that I'm depositing, the bold that I have, the one-time fee, or the bold creation fee that we have as well, and the interest rate per year that I'm paying, which is 270 bold. And we also have something called a refundable gas deposit. It's only used in case of liquidations. So I'm gonna approve this now. Give me a second. In the back end, there's a MetaMask running. I don't know if you see that on the screen share.
No, it's blocked, but we can. Oh, but no, it's coming up here.
Oh, okay.
Well, it flashed for a second, but we can envision a MetaMask signing screen.
No worries.
Cool. Now I've just approved the contract. Now I can open a position. And once I've opened the position, you will see kind of like a card that actually your position. The one cool thing about Liquity V2 as well is that your positions are opened as NFTs. Now you might be wondering, oh, NFTs, that's cool, but what real value does that bring? The real value that brings is that under this one address that I have, this 39A address, I could pretty much open multiple positions at multiple LTVs and multiple collateral types. So that's actually quite cool. And that's something that was a request that we had from Liquidity V1. So I've opened the Trove. Now you can see, on the homepage here, it shows my position, where it's at, what my liquidation price is, what my redemption risk is, and everything. And that's kind of my loan position is 3,648 bold. Now you might be wondering, okay, I have this bold. What can I do with this bold, right? There's a few things you can do. As I mentioned earlier, we have something within Liquity V2 called the stability pool, which is like our chief liquidator of sorts. And one of the coolest things about Liquity V2 is that we enshrine 75% of revenue from all the interest rate that these markets generate to go towards their respective stability pools. So just now I borrowed on the rETH market. Out of that $3,649 that I borrowed, 75% of that fee has gone already to essentially the people who are sitting in this stability pool. So every time there's a new position that gets opened, 75% gets into the stability pool, and that's a continuous, always happening kind of yield source, right? So what I could do now is I could deposit my bold in one of these three stability pools. And as you can see, like the TVL kind of corresponds with the popularity of these LSTs as well. And yeah, now I can decide, like, there's also kind of like an arbitrage kind of game that I can play, right? So I borrowed on the rETH stability pool, but maybe I want to deposit into the ETH stability pool just because I think that, the ETH stability pool, there will be more borrowers who are going to borrow against ETH instead of rETH, and vice versa, right? So that's kind of like a easy, kind of low risk, in my opinion, risk-free yield that you can get for just kind of staking in a smart contract that is immutable, right? Now, on top of this, the APRs here kind of reflect the 75% interest rate that's always coming to these different pools. But one of the cool things about Liquity as well is that since we are, let's just say I'm going to deposit into here. So I'm depositing my bold that I borrowed into the ETH stability pool. I'm going to add it as deposit. There is a MetaMask that's popping up here on the right. I'm going to confirm it. Now, one of the cool things about Liquity V2 as well is that on top of this 75% that the protocol continues emitting to these stability pools, whenever there's a liquidation, since this is kind of like the first line of liquidations as well, these funds are used to pay off kind of like the underwater positions that go on into the in the protocol itself as well. So what that means is that if anytime there was a liquidation, a part of this 3643 bold that I have gets converted into ETH pro rata. So it's a way of kind of like buying the bottom, or buying like liquidations of people as well. So when I think about it, I think of the stability pool as being a venue where you can earn continuous real yield in bold, which is a stable coin, but also kind of distressed ETH at the bottom of markets as well. So it's like a venue that gives you both. Now, another cool thing about Liquity V2 is that We are launching Liquity V2 with a BUSL license, and what that means is that if people in this call didn't know, Liquity V1 is, I think, the third or fourth most forked protocol. And with Liquity V2, we decided, we didn't get any value from all these forks in Liquity V1, and a lot of them kind of ended up getting hacked, and there was no real people would come to our Discord and kind of complain and stuff, and it was just not a great user experience for everyone and also for us. So for Liquity V2, what we decided to do was we embraced kind of like this friendly fork model. So we have 15 plus forks who are all coming online on various different EVM chains, which have kind of taken our code, and what they've done is, say a fork on Arbitrum, for example, they have maybe changed the collateral type instead of rETH and Lido ETH to become like Arb and I don't know, Coinbase ETH or whatever. So there's 15 plus forks who all are following the same playbook with like different collateral types, maybe even more than 3 collaterals, because I mentioned earlier, Liquidity V2 is immutable. And all of them have a mandate to kind of airdrop to users of the mainnet instance of Liquidity V2. And all of them will be airdropping between 4 and 10%, depending on, like, each of them have their own kind of criterias to people in the stability pool. So, one of the benefits for a new user now is you can first borrow for cheaper compared to the market. You can also earn kind of like the APR that we're providing here on LiV2 is like 30+%. And on top of this APRs, you also have all these 15 plus forks who are going to come online at different times, who are going to kind of give a portion of that 4 to 10% towards these different stability pools as well. So, for users, it's kind of like it's a kind of a good deal, right? Right now, I'm paying 7.4% interest, and I'm getting 39% APR just by kind of having a delta neutral position. And on top of this APR, I also have all these forks who are going to give me rewards at various times. Now, that is the first use case, right? Kind of just depositing into one of these stability pools. I'm going to stop here for any questions if people have, and then I'm going to show you another use case for users as well.
Yeah, there's actually a question that we have here, but just first, excellent description and demonstration here. The first question here comes from Jasper. He's asking whether people who are already using Liquidity V2 are going to be eligible for the airdrops and other incentives.
Yeah, so you would need to, good question. You would need to either deposit it into the stability pool or provide liquidity for Bold on Curve. So if you were just just hold Bold, then you would not be eligible to get any of the fork rewards. And actually, that we do have on our docs page a pretty detailed overview of what percentage and where our forks are rewarding. So yeah, you need to put that Bold to use. So you can't just hold it. You need to either put it into the stability pool or you need to provide liquidity for it on Curve. If that makes sense.
Yeah, there's a follow-up question here. Did you mean the individual stability pool, or does it have to be S-Bold?
No, individual stability pools is fine. So let me know if you see my screen now, which kind of shows like the various different friendly forks that we have. So all these friendly forks have essentially their own incentive program. So I'll give you an example of a fork that just launched on Scroll called Quill. And in Quill's case, if you go into their docs here, they clearly say that 2.75% of Quill supply will be distributed equally between 3 seasons, and it's going to be distributed into the Bold USDC pair, and those who deposit Bold into one of the 3 stability pools will also earn Quill incentives. So, each of these friendly forks will have their own rewards, and you can follow our friendly fork docs here. We plan to also have a Dune dashboard in a couple of weeks, which kind of shows what rewards who's giving. And in Quill's case, 2.75% will go to mainnet, right, to the bold USDC curve pools and the stability pools. But then they're also reserving 1.25% to go towards growing bold USDQ, which is their stablecoin on Scroll. So what I expect to see is all these forks obviously want to help bold grow, the mainnet bold grow, but they also want liquidity for their own pairs on their various chains, right? So they probably will incentivize a portion to both, if that makes sense.
Yeah, perfect. And then one other question. I think trading's kind of self-answered it, but I guess I guess maybe a point of clarification and then a question. Liquidity, the protocol has really two.
Sorry, could I just correct you? It's liquidity, not liquidity.
Yes, I know. I am trying my darndest not to put the D in there. I think it's just rolling off my tongue here for it. Liquity is the stable coin for V1 is the LUSD, and for V2 it's bold. I guess just as making certain I understand that correctly. And then are both of those found on multiple chains?
Yes, that's a great question. So both LUSD and bold are on multiple chains. We actually have adopted the Chainlink standard, CCIP. So if you were to go to transporter.io, which is kind of like the Chainlink UX for bridging, you can pretty much kind of bridge bold from Ethereum to Arbitrum to pretty much all the different chains that supports bold. So I believe up until now we have Arbitrum, Optimism, Scroll, and Base supported by the CCIP bridge. And as more chains come online and have friendly forks, and there is an incentive to have bold liquidity there, then you can bridge bold through there. Yeah, so right now, for example, Scroll might be a good use case for borrowers of bold, right? Because the Scroll fork just went online, and they're, as I showed you earlier here, they're incentivizing 1.25% of their token supply to grow liquidity between bold and USDQ, which is their stablecoin.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Yeah, you were going to explain other use cases for bold besides depositing in the staking pools or the stability pools.
Yeah, so one thing that I want to mention is I mentioned earlier how Liquity V2 has we pass on 100% of protocol revenue every week to two venues. 75% I mentioned goes to these three pools that you see, the stability pools. That's enshrined. 75% is always going. That's enshrined, and there's 25% left, right? And you might be wondering, where does that 25% go? That 25% every week is also enshrined within the protocol, goes to essentially various initiatives that help grow bold liquidity. Now, right now, there are 3 initiatives. Anyone can go and post an initiative, by the way, by going into the discourse page that we have here. But the idea is that, at least in the early stages now that we've just launched, the main focus should be towards growing bold liquidity. So every week, 25% will go there. And right now, there are 3 venues where this 25% goes. There's bold LUSD on Curve. There's bold USDC on Curve as well. And then the third is it can go to the DeFi Collective, who are a entity that I think you might have heard of, who manage treasuries of various different protocols. Their core mandate really is to grow bold liquidity on various layer 2s. So Velodrome, Aerodome, Ramses, venues like dexes like this in various L2s. The DeFi Collective helps grow that. So every week, 25% goes there. And this 25% is kind of determined, like where it goes is determined by the LQTY stakers. So if you were to stake your LQTY, you pretty much are able to kind of give thumbs up and thumbs down onto this various things. And and you can allocate your vote accordingly, right? So you can allocate, let's say, bold USDC to get 70%, bold LUSD to get 15%, and the DeFi collective to get 15%. So this happens every week. You have up to every Wednesday, every Thursday at midnight UTC is when these rewards get sent to all these different pools. So you have until Wednesday to kind of uh, upvote and downvote where it goes. And yeah, that's kind of like this automatic 25% enshrinement of fees is quite cool, because what this means is that for bold USDC, for example, last week we earned 55K in revenue. Out of that 55K, 25%, as I mentioned, went to various different pools. That's 13, almost 14K. 14K was essentially went to various different these three venues, and they were kind of allocated as a vote to, like, 72% went to bold USDC, 17% went to bold LUSD, and 12% went to the DeFi collective. So there's like, it's kind of like a sustainable yield source, right? The protocol is just relying on the interest rate it generates from borrowers to send to these various curve pools, right? So now, what does that mean for you as a bold user? You can go and deposit your bold into one of these two pools here, and pretty much earn, as you can see here, you're getting 13.25% in LUSD and 4% in bold every week. That's coming to you, right? So this automatic 25% enshrinement is quite cool, because it means that there is always continuous yield coming every week for these two pools. And as we go, there'll probably be more initiatives. Let's say maybe Aave, just to throw the name out there, might want to have bold as a borrowable asset on Aave, and maybe they want to throw incentives, or maybe Fluid, or maybe someone else. So the idea is that it's all towards growing utility for bold.
Yeah, perfect. Just a couple of questions here. You might have mentioned it, but where does one obtain the LQTY token in the process here? I think I missed that.
Yeah, so the LQTY is our old token from Liquity V1. So we didn't come out with a new token for Liquity V2. We stuck with LQTY. You can buy LQTY off various different centralized exchanges, but since we are a DeFi protocol, I recommend buying it off a DEX. There's some liquidity for it on Uniswap. There's some, there's most of its liquidity is on Uniswap, so you can just acquire it on Uniswap. Staking LQTY gets you two main benefits. One is that you pretty much keep all the rewards from Liquity V1, because what we do in the back end is that we stake that liquidity on V2 back into Liquity V1. So you keep all the rewards from Liquity V1, and on top of that, you get this voting power that I mentioned to direct where the 25% emissions from the protocol goes towards. So to either of these pools, or if more pools come up, then maybe towards those as well. And what we eventually also expect to see is that maybe there might be some bribe markets to develop on top of it. Maybe, like, other stablecoins want to pair their stablecoin against bold, and they want to bribe LQTY voters. So that also might end up leading to more rewards for LQTY holders. And yeah,
and that token right now, it's not being minted or produced or inflated. It's just simply your protocol native token.
Yeah, it's our protocol native token. It's actually one of the most, like, in terms of circulating supply, I believe already 98% of it is already circulating. So it's one of the, we have a joke in that I have a joke, I guess. It's like low FDV, high floating, kind of. It's one of those kind of tokens. So yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, and then one last question, and then I wanted to ask you a little bit about doing research here. I noticed that there was also a way to leverage a position in ETH using the protocol. So I want to make certain we have time for that. Maybe that's a good question. Is there a way to use this protocol to leverage ETH position? or an rETH position?
Yeah, you can. In this particular wallet, I don't actually have the necessary ETH to do that right now. But yeah, you could come into the multiply tab here on Liquity V2 and multiply your exposure. We can actually on the front end, we're actually rolling out a zapper. The Liquity.app front end is still waiting on a zapper that we're going to be releasing. So I would say if you want to leverage your exposure to or multiply your exposure to Ether or rETH or even Lido ETH, the best venue to do that right now is probably DeFi Saver, which is one of our other front ends. So if you go into DeFi Saver, you can also do like a simulation mode that they have here, and there you can let's just have this. You can pretty much go in here, put in the ETH that you want to leverage up to. You want to leverage. So ETH, I would say, is the most liquid one since it has like the most amount of liquidity on various dexes. You can go in there. You can select the desired leverage that you want to set. We provide leverage up to 9.1x for ETH, and for the other collateral assets, it's a bit lower because of the LTV. But yeah, you can go in there, set the leverage slider that you want, and kind of like the interest rate that you want to set as well. Since I mentioned earlier, our interest rates are at Liquity V2 are a bit lower than other venues. So if you want to leverage at a high multiple, I would say Liquity V2 is probably a good venue to do that. And then here you can see as well, if I were to leverage at say 5.5x, and I want to set my interest rate at 4.5%. On the right here, you clearly see kind of where we are in terms of the amount of debt, the amount of collateral ratio, the interest rate that you're paying, and the liquidation price and everything. And yeah, once you do that, you can just create a position. On the side here, you see first you have to create a smart wallet because DeFi Saver uses safe wallets. But once you do that, yeah, you can easily create a leverage position on V2 as well. We will be rolling out an updated front end in the coming weeks, which allows you to, which Liquity.app and Liquity.io and others who use our front end SDK kit will you'll be able to multiply your position from there itself. But for now, DeFi Saver is probably your best venue as a front end where you can multiply your exposure.
Well, excellent. This has probably been one of the best descriptions and walkthroughs of any DeFi lending protocol I've seen to date. So I really appreciate what you've shared with us today. As we start to kind of close out our community call, are there any other important items about Liquity? I'm still working on that D there. Liquity that you feel is important for the Rocket Pool community to know that you haven't had a chance yet to cover?
No, I think I've covered most of it. I think, as I mentioned earlier, if you're opening a position, make sure to ensure to check like the average interest rate that people have set before opening a position. If you want to kind of farm airdrops and whatever, make sure to go into our friendly forks docs that we have on our page, which gives you a clear kind of indication of what they're rewarding and when. I personally am of the opinion that, borrowing on V2 and kind of staking in the stability pool or LPing is kind of the most low risk and high reward plays that you could potentially do, just because you save quite a bit on borrowing with us, and you also get all these airdrops that you can farm. And another thing is, make sure to check out all these friendly forks on various chains, right? I mean, we'll have a friendly fork coming out on Hyperliquid, one on Barachain, and as you probably see from following on Twitter and whatnot, like there's a lot of hype behind this, and they're probably going to throw a lot of incentives. So make sure to follow that as well, and probably mint some of their version of Bold as well.
Perfect. And then if folks either wanted to learn more about the protocol and do their own research or get in contact with you, what are the best places to do that?
Yeah, good question. So follow our Twitter for sure at Liquity Protocol. you also come into our Discord. We have I see some names here who are quite active on our Discord as well. Come to our Discord. There's a big community who kind of help answer questions and can help with also any small issues you might have of understanding clarity and stuff. And you can follow me on Twitter as well. My handle is SamExotic3. I tend to try to shill the borrow rates of Liquity V2 every now and again. So yeah, those 3 venues are the best.
Well, perfect here. This will kind of wrap up and conclude this morning's or this evening's Rocket Pool community call. And again, Sam, thank you very much for spending the time with us. This has been an excellent walkthrough, and it seems like a very, very interesting product. I wish Liquidity here the best of luck in its continued launch here. It seems like it's off to already a great success, and I hope that continues for you.
No, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, look forward to coming back again with some more updates, and yeah, borrow bold, guys.